What's up, everybody? My name is Thomas. You are tuning in once again to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast live on Grandstand Sports Network. Originally, I had just planned for this to be a straight run-through show where I would talk about all these sports topics, one after the next, but I had some prior arrangements, things to do today, so I'm back on the mic to talk about Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel and his quote-unquote comeback season, SZN, which has been a trending hashtag on Twitter for the better part of the last month now. And I want to talk about Johnny Manziel from start to finish. I've definitely feel the need to talk about this. Because you go back to 2014, there were few players as polarizing, as electrifying, as exciting, as entertaining as Johnny Manziel was as a Texas A&M Aggies quarterback. Truly a phenomenon, unlike the likes of which I haven't seen before, maybe since Tim Tebow or since Johnny Manziel. There hasn't been many like him. Oftentimes we're comparing Baker Mayfield to Johnny Manziel. I don't really see that in terms of ability. I see that in terms of their off-the-field stuff, which I think is a stupid comparison anyway. But that's neither here nor there. Johnny Manziel has announced that he will join the NFL, or the quote-unquote Spring League, which takes place in Alabama. March 28th is the opening day for this league, and I don't know the logistics of it. I don't know the ins and outs of the league, but I just want to talk about Johnny Manziel's comeback bid. Hop back in the time machine a little bit and talk about Johnny Manziel's career now, from then until now. So I want to let it be known that I have no shame in admitting this. I had Johnny Manziel rated as my number one quarterback coming out of the draft. 2014 NFL draft, the quarterback class. I thought Manziel was number one. I thought Carr was number two. Bortles was number three. Bridgewater was number four. And then Garoppolo was number five. Or actually, I think I had Garoppolo 4 and Bridgewater 5. Yes, that was it. So, reason why I had Johnny Manziel number one is why would I not? He was an electrifying player. He was a winning player. He won big games. He played big in big games. He checked off virtually every single box that you would want a rookie quarterback to check off. The only box that had a question mark next to it in my scouting report of Johnny Manziel was his character. His off-the-field issues. We knew that he had some trials and tribulations while he was at Texas A&M. We knew that he had some off-the-field alcohol-related issues. Would those persist? Unfortunately, for Johnny Manziel, they did. They persisted during his 2-year stint as a Cleveland Brown, and they've persisted throughout his time outside the NFL. Now, Johnny Manziel did an interview with Good Morning America, came out and said, I have started to take a look into my mental health a little bit. I've started to take a look into my health in general, and I have come to the discovery that I am bipolar, which I don't think this is a laughing matter. I know that there's a lot of people that rag on Johnny Manziel out there and say, this guy's a screw-up, this guy's a dork, he's this, he's that. They name-call Johnny Manziel constantly. I think that that's very wrong, kicking a guy while he's down. Do you, the quote-unquote haters of Johnny Manziel, truly believe that Johnny Manziel enjoys the spot that he's in, enjoys the fact that he ran himself out of the NFL, enjoys the fact that he ruined his opportunity in the National Football League? No. I am for certain that Johnny Manziel probably wakes up every morning and thinks to himself, wow, I really screwed up. Which is why at 25 years old, Johnny Manziel is looking to right the wrongs of his past and commit himself fully, once again, to the sport of football, to the game of football. And I've always said this, and I always will. If it does or doesn't work out for Johnny Manziel, whether he returns to the NFL or not, one thing needs to be stated, that Johnny Manziel is not in the NFL because of his off-the-field issues. His on-the-field issues, they were very few and far between. He's a talented player. He can throw the ball. He can extend plays. He is a rare specimen as a quarterback. He has rare ability. And the question is, does he still have that? That's the question. He had rare ability. Does he still have that? That's the question. The reason why he's not in the NFL is due to his off-the-field issues, not his on-the-field issues. Unfortunately, his off-the-field issues parlayed into on-the-field issues. He wasn't willing to prepare. He wasn't willing to read the playbook. He wasn't willing to study like the greats are willing to study. Tom Brady might not have all the talent in the world, but he's willing to work hard. He's willing to do his due diligence in the film room. Johnny Manziel, talented, wasn't willing to do those things. There's a stark contrast between the two. So, all that being said, do I think he can come back? Do I think he can make an impact on an NFL team? Of course. I think that if this guy has all of his ducks in a row, has all of his heart, will, mind, body, whatever you want to call it, in line, he can make that comeback in the National Football League, and he can become a starter in the National Football League. There were times when he was at Cleveland where I thought, there he is. It was just in glimpses. It wasn't constant. It wasn't consistent, I should say. He was a decent player for a short time. He showed flashes of what made him a first-round draft choice. But he also showed many, many more flashes of a player that needed to take time away from the game, get his ducks in a row, get his life in order, get clean, and come back hopefully sooner rather than later. And this is sooner rather than later. He's married now. He's settled down. I definitely think that he is willing to admit that he had some real issues as a human being. And don't we all? I mean, none of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. You know, the listeners, none of us can claim that we're perfect. Are we supposed to have sympathy for Johnny Manziel? That's debatable. I can't really have sympathy for somebody that threw away their opportunity, but I will, an opportunity that millions of people would want to have, but I will say that I sympathize with anyone that has inner demons, and Johnny Manziel did. So in that regard, I definitely sympathize with him. I think that he's a guy that definitely knows what he lost. He's definitely willing to gain it back. And I also want to talk about the idea that Johnny Manziel could have been doomed from the start. The fact that he grew up in a family with wealth. The fact that he had everything kind of propped up for him, handed to him in terms of his upbringing. He even admitted as much. The fact that he went to Cleveland. I mean, I remember having my buddies over. It was the 2014 NFL draft. It was a huge question as to where he was going to go. And I remember saying specifically that if Cleveland was the team to draft Johnny Manziel, it will be over before it begins. And that was the case. It was over before it began. I think if Johnny Manziel was drafted by virtually any other team, he might have lasted a little bit longer in the league. He wouldn't have been as destructive as he was in the early onset of his NFL career. And I think he was destructive in the early onset of his career because Cleveland was just so terrible, and then he knew that they would put a lot of pressure on him. So, I think his path was written. His path was written that he was a destructive guy. He was going down the wrong path. But I think if he was drafted by another team, it might not have lasted. It might have lasted longer, if that makes sense. That might have been the only silver lining, is the team that drafted Johnny Manziel, a team that has been quarterback-starved, a team that has failed at providing their quarterbacks that they've drafted with adequate weapons around them, or failed at developing the quarterbacks. Can definitely make a case that they've had busts. They've had Tim Couch, Brady Quinn, Brandon Weeden, Johnny Manziel. But you can also make a case that some of those guys in that grouping were actually busts, and then some of them had actual real physical talent that they just didn't build around. So there's two sides to every coin. As I take a sip of water there, sorry about that. There's two sides to every coin, and Johnny Manziel hopefully redeems himself in this quote-unquote comeback season, in this quote-unquote spring league, and hopefully he returns to what he was meant to be. Hopefully he returns to prominence as a guy that might have fallen down but got back up. And truthfully, everyone loves a true underdog story, whether it's Tim Tebow's bid in the major leagues, whether it's Johnny Manziel's probability of coming back, whether it's RG3's probability of coming back. There's a lot of underdog stories of guys that haven't panned out yet, but we hope that they get back on their feet as human beings, as individuals, and we hope that they become what they were meant to become in the National Football League. I know that there's a lot of teams that have backups and third stringers that Johnny Manziel is far better than those backups and those third stringers. Does that mean he's a starter? That remains to be seen. I thought, he did have what it takes to become a franchise guy. He just needs to apply himself. He needs to lay off the bottle, lay off whatever it was that he was doing. God knows what he was doing. TMZ was on him virtually at every turn, and he put himself in that position by hanging around with the company that he was hanging out with, enabling some of the company like Josh Gordon. It was just not a good situation. And the best thing, I think, for Johnny Football, in order for Johnny Football to return, was to stay away from football for a little while, regain your footing, come to grips with reality that he is throwing his playing days away, and I think he's done that. So best of luck to Johnny Manziel, best of luck to him and his comeback bid. I'm pulling for the guy. I will not lie. I've always been a Johnny Manziel fan. I've always thought that he might not be the best individual, but his talent is truly rare, and he's a truly electrifying and exciting player who would make the NFL a much more exciting league to watch. So I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take. Take care, everybody.